All right, time to bring in Mike LaTulip, Illini Inquirer basketball analyst, team on the field of 68 as well. He's all over the place, and he's globetrotting, staying in the U.S. technically, but got far away, got a nice little respite. How was the vacation, Mike LaTulip?
Didn't feel like the U.S. from a travel standpoint. That's about as far as you. That is probably about as far as you can go. The vacation was great. Travel kind of sucked, but that's what you get for going to a tropical destination, I guess. But it was good. Some rest, some recovery, and then you're just tired all over again when you get home because of the jet lag on the way back. So it's all good.
Yeah, you're tired from vacationing. That's
exactly. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad the timing worked out. I'm about to head on vacation for about 8-9 days here. Can't wait for it. And kudos to Andrej Stojaković for making this happen when he did, so I didn't have to worry about that. But this is a big one, Mike. This is the biggest transfer portal addition they will add all off season. We have him number 35, I believe, CBS and 24/7 Sports in the portal rankings. But why is Andrej Stojaković potentially so impactful for Illinois basketball?
I think you just see the gaps that he fills for this team, for the personnel, for I think what they want to do offensively. I think the impact that's a really dependable scoring option on the wing with length and with size. His feel, I think, allows him to play in a very malleable offensive system that I think is going to do a number of things that we'll get into, I'm sure, on the pod. But he gets to the free throw line at a high rate. He's had proven production at this level. And so that's what makes him incredibly impactful. But I think you look at the flip side of it for the kid too, why it's important for him. I mean, this is a kid that's coming to a winning program that's had a really good winning tradition. Illinois basketball is a good winning tradition, but specifically in the last 5 years or so, what they've been able to do, he's going to play in a lot of marquee games, big time games on a big stage. This is a team that I think is going to go to the NCAA tournament again, which is something that he hasn't done. And so all that I think is huge. And I think it's great to see a kid. He's not the only one, but it feels like it's the minority nowadays that kids make decisions based on basketball. And I think that's what Stoyakovich did.
Yeah. What have you thought of his game? McDonald's All-American, big pedigree, NBA lineage with his dad, Peja. So there are high expectations for him. Passes up Duke, some big-time programs, Kentucky coming out of high school to go to a school with high academics on the West Coast where he wanted to be. What did you think of his development the first 2 years and the ups and downs he went through?
There were definitely ups and downs. I think his freshman year, a lot of it was strength, and I think trying to figure out where he belonged within that offense at Stanford and just what type of player he is. When you're in high school, you can kind of just do everything, right? But in college, there's only a select few that can still do everything. The other guys have to find what those strengths are and mold their game around it. And I thought when his sophomore season at Cal is when he really started to realize, okay, I can be a catch and shoot guy, but also attacking long closeouts, getting to the free throw line, creating advantages with his size. I think he did a good job with that. And I'm even excited to see the step that he's going to take with Illinois, because I think there's still parts of his game that can be improved. And I think this is why this is such a great fit on both sides, because I think that Illinois can get that out of him. And I think that's probably part of the calculus for him making the decision.
Yeah, I imagine Will Riley was a part of their pitch. I imagine Marcus Damask was a part of their pitch. He's got little shades of both of those guys. And obviously, the lineage, everyone thinks Page and shooter, he's shown that capability in the past, but a little bit inconsistent as a shooter the last couple of years. So what are your expectations in this offense with this personnel? What will he be for Illinois?
I think compared to Cal, when you watch him, I think he was 47 assists, 61 turnovers, something like that. I mean, he had a negative assist to turnover ratio. And part of it is I don't think he's going to need to put the ball on the floor as much with Illinois. I think he'll get a lot of his production. There's going to be some open floor stuff for sure, getting out in transition, creating advantages that way. he was really, really strong in backdowns this year, Barkley's, whatever you want to call him, just like Marcus was. I think his free throw rate in backdowns was insane. He got to the line at a really high rate. And I talked about being able to use him when Tommy's a fulcrum as the 5. Now, this is before they got Petravic too. So, I don't think that totally changes things, because I think there's still ways that they're going to want to play through Tommy. But also having Petravic, I think, helps Andres as well. So there's a lot of different areas, but I think just from an improvement standpoint, something I alluded to earlier, I think, the shooting is interesting, because I think there are things to become a really, really high level shooter. And I consider high level, elite level shooting, when you eclipse like the 40 to 42% plus mark, there's some stuff mechanically there that I think might make it difficult. He's going to have to be really economical, I guess, with his shot selection, I think, to be like a 40 plus guy. But if he's a 35% plus guy, on top of the improvement I think he can make, he's got good feel as a cutter, and I think that'll be accentuated, like I always talk about, when you have guys that have good feel, like Petrovic, like Tomislav. Kylan can make really good reads. That'll be great. I think the other area too that Terrence Shannon, experienced an uptick in is offensive rebounding, and just rebounding in general, because he's 6'7", and he's not a bad athlete. I actually think he's a plus athlete for relative to, I think, how people talk about him. So I think that'll help him, maybe get more putbacks around the rim. All that stuff is what I'm talking about, is efficiency, because if he can improve his efficiency, especially from the outside, the types of shots that he takes, he'll be what I think he can end up being, which is a first round pick in 2026.
Wow. So we'll talk about that here in a second. What I love, Mike, this, gets to the free throw line, 345th in the country in free throw rate, 82% free throw shooter. That will help efficiency as well. But defensively, Mike, this is a guy that had a 3.7% block percentage. It's more than a block per game, really long. As you said, he's not a bad athlete. He could be a good athlete. What do you think he can bring defensively?
Yeah, I think guys like him that have really good feel offensively can be really good positionally, defensively. I think it goes for, honestly, a number of guys on this roster for Illinois. But off the ball, he knows where to be. He's great with that positioning. But also on the ball, there's times where he can get beat for sure. But what you alluded to, the recovery, it's honestly something that Matthew Meyer was really good at. Yep. But his usually came from just kind of being disinterested and, getting beat or getting backdoored. Dre is more, if he does get beat off the dribble, he's great and has a gift at being able to track the ball, block the ball. I mean, this dude had 6 blocks against Notre Dame this year, 6 at the wing spot, which is just insane. I mean, guys just don't stumble into that level of shot blocking. So that's something I think is certainly notable. And then when you have better defenders around you, it allows you to, I think, be a little bit more efficient on that end. But he wasn't poor on that end at all. And I think that's only going to be accentuated being around better defenders and I think a better team overall.
Mike, you said potential first round draft pick in the 2026 NBA draft. I know you don't say that lightly.
No.
So that is the ceiling. And that to me would be all Big Ten first team caliber player we're talking about, or all Big Ten second team, whatever it is. But he clearly has the pedigree that is going to get that kind of interest. And now he's potentially on a winning team that'll accentuate his obviously positives. What are the ceiling and floor for him, if you want to expound on that for next year?
Yeah, when I talk about being a first round pick, I mean, that doesn't always, especially at the college level, it doesn't always have to be. I mean, Terrence was a late first round pick, probably could have gone higher if not for all the bullshit he had to deal with. He probably could have gone higher, but Terrence's accolades were insane. I mean, you're talking about
would have been a first team All-American.
Yeah, would have been a first team All-American, repeat All-American. If not for Zach Edey, probably would have been back-to-back Big Ten Player of the Year. I mean, that's how good he was, and that still ended up he still ended up being a late first round pick. That's where I see Stoyakovich being. I mean, if he can improve, like I said, the efficiency, and it doesn't have to be crazy. I think if he can shoot 35, 36% from three, show that he can do it on a decent volume, that's only going to help him, because I think some of the other tools are there as a guy with good size that can space, that can slash, that is really heady to, at the next level. So that's where I see. I don't think it has to be first team All Big Ten. I think he has a ceiling of first team All Big Ten, but it doesn't have to be. I think I expect him to be an all league guy. That's, if you spend that type of money and you get that type of guy coming in, that's definitely what you expect. Is it going to come in the form of 18 points a game? I go back and forth on this, right? Because I see him, with the guys around him, maybe being more 15, 16 a game, but can it get to 18 if he's more efficient from three, if he gets more opportunities in transition, if he gets to the line even more, if he gets more offensive rebounds, if he finds 2 or 3 opportunities per game in that Will Riley spot that we talked about, where you're cutting from the wing when the ball goes up top. And I mean, all that stuff I think is on the table for him. It's why the upside I think is high, because he isn't a finished product. And I think there's more that Illinois can get out of him. And I think that's something that, again, went probably, I'm sure, into the pitch for Illinois, but also probably went into the rationale behind why him and his family chose Illinois. Because I think they've proven that they can get that out of guys. Certainly Will and Kasparis were guys that were projected to be first round picks that certainly didn't hurt that by coming to Illinois, despite Will struggling for that middle part of the season. So that's what excites me about him and about his fit on this team. Because I do think that in a day and age where we look at guys that make decisions and you're scratching your head, you're like, he's going there for why? And when you ask yourself why, it's usually because of money. And granted, yes, there was money involved in this type of decision, but the basketball fit makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, your range of scoring there is, I think, perfect. And here's why. I mean, one, he's already shown he can score at that high level. His usage might not be as high at Illinois, right? Because he's got a lot more talent around him, but it's going to be high. Will Riley, last 15 games at Illinois, 15.9 points per game. Marcus DeMaster in conference play, 18.4 points per game. That's a good range. Like that's kind of my expectation with it.
Yeah, and it's going to depend. We can get into kind of how, and maybe this is more like a Petrovic conversation too, but like how the offense is going to run, what they're going to do, how they're going to manage personnel on the floor and what that means for what they run. I think it's great that they have, I picture Petrovic and ball screens. I picture pick and pop with Tommy. I picture pick and pop with Mirkovic, Humrichous off the bench as a pick and pop guy. Obviously playing with pace, you can run ball screens for Kylan. You can post up Stoyakovich. You can post up Mirkovic. I mean, there's a lot that you can do, but just because you have a lot that you can do doesn't necessarily just give you an identity offensively. Yeah. So that's what they're going to have to figure out as the summer, late spring, summer, and fall rolls around. And the really important part that I'll mention now is your roster's pretty much set on May 1st. That was not the case the last 2 years, and especially wasn't the case last year. And how all those guys, when they arrived to campus, was so staggered that they had to just really truncate everything to the fall. And now the hope is that, I don't know when Petrovic's season ends and Mirkovic season ends. You may know that. I don't know. But the hope is that you can get them over here and have some sort of semblance of a team before the 4th of July, because you didn't have that last year.
For sure. I want to dive into that towards the end of this. But Mihailo Petrović, this was kind of a, by the way, floor for Stoyakovich would be like the third scorer on this team. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. Floor, like absolute floor. I think he's too toolsy to not be used at a level that would make him anything but probably a top 2 scorer on this team.
I agree. I'm just trying to do the absolute negative of that.
I guess that is what the floor is, right? That is the floor. Yeah.
All right. Mihailo Petrović, stealthy addition, Mike. And what I kind of thinking is, they were looking at Adam Miller. They were looking at some kind of like 3-and-D guards to go along with Kylan. Then they go get a pure point guard. What's that tell you?
Well, the commitment happened while I was on the flight to Maui, and I got the Wi-Fi. So I saw it in real time, and it was crazy because at that point, I think it was on Stoyakovich's visit.
Yeah.
I mean, he was on campus that day. So if you were looking for a commitment, I mean, the Adam Miller thing seemed distant at that point. So I don't think that's one you'd be looking for, but you would have thought of in Stoyakovich. Now you get the Petravic one. And we talked on the last podcast we were on. We're like, well, they're kind of going to run things through Tommy, which I think they're still going to do. But the reason why this ad is so important is because if you have scenarios where, Kylan can come off ball screens for sure, and he got better at it as the year went on, just in terms of taking care of the ball. But this is a dude that, like, this is a ball screen point guard. I mean, this is a guy that is, because he's 22 years old. And it always correlates with the turnover numbers. And this is not necessarily like directly a KJ thing, but it's somewhat a KJ thing where Illinois fans had to kind of experience KJ figuring himself out. And that just comes with natural growing pains and turnovers. Petrović knows who he is, and he knows what his limits are. And so that is going to lead you to being more efficient with the basketball. And so that's why his assist to turnover ratio is what it is, because he doesn't have to, like, can I split through this? I mean, he's got better burst than KJ. I think that's what makes this such an exciting pickup, because he does put rim pressure and paint pressure. He brings that to this team, and he's insane finishing around the rim. He'll come in contact with better athletes for sure than the bigs that are in the Adriatic League. But yeah, I just think it's so important, because I'm envisioning a scenario where, okay, if you want to run offense through Tommy at the 5, you're going to run into certain teams that are like, cool, we're just switching. We're just going to switch everything. And now, at least when you have a guy like Mirković that can come in, now you can put Tommy in the corner as a spacer, and you can make Mirković the pick and pop guy. We're cool. If you want to switch, now we can get a big on Petravic, or if you don't want to switch, now we got another pick and pop opportunity with Mirković. Like, there's a lot that you can do to move them around, but the pace that he plays with falls right into what you want to do and how fast Kylan can play, getting Stoyakovich in advantage creation situations. Like, it makes a lot of sense. And it makes even more sense that it's a proven, experienced guy like Petravic, because he's played at a high level for years now. And I think he's a guy that can make an immediate impact. I saw people like, watch out, Braden Smith. I don't think fair to Petravic. I think dial it down a little bit. I mean, if Petravic ended up being, like, I think a ceiling outcome for Petravic is all league, any team. Like, you're like, whoa, that's great. You come in, make that type of impact. That's how I look at this type of addition. I'm not in the camp that's like, we got the next Braden Smith. I don't think that's fair for anybody in this situation, but a hell of an ad nonetheless.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. I wouldn't go that far, but it's a piece I didn't think they'd have on this team. So now I'm like recalibrating how they play, Mike, the lineups that they use. But that's why I just find it fascinating how they went and got this guy. But we've already seen proof of concept. That Adriatic League 20-plus-year-olds, it translates. Like we saw with Tomislav Ivicic, right? So that's what gets me excited, is the high floor he brings and how he impacts Kylan too, right? Like now you have two guards like that. I mean, what is the upside of that for your backcourt? And I guess the downside would be, this is probably a guy who's got to chase shooters defensively, because he's about 6'1", right? I mean, he's quick. We know what he can do with the ball in his hands, but just, how do you think he impacts how they played that backcourt?
Well, he's definitely not 6'3". I feel pretty confident in that. But then again, I watched KJ overseas last year before he got there. And I'm like, I don't see 6'5", 6'6". And then when I went and watched practice, him and I got out of the car at the same time. I'm like, he might be 6'5", 6'6". So he looks more like 6'1" to me. And again, takes one to know one. I was a guy that whenever they tagged anything in an article or anything, everything said generously listed at. So I know that. But yeah, the reason why it's beneficial to have these two next to each other, I look at defensively, because when you have Kylan as a point of attack defender, that allows Petrovic to be off the ball and chase, which I think he actually is good at. He can, this is something they actually haven't had the past few years since maybe Trent. Trent was more on ball, but off the ball, it's just easier for guys that aren't that big to navigate screens and chase and not be this big target. So that's helpful. But also, it just gives you a guy that is a true table setting point guard offensively. And that's not to say he can't play off the ball. He didn't do much of it this year. But Kylan being able to be that combo, maybe him and Ty split those duties when Petravic is out of the game. That's probably, I guess, how I'd envision it. But yeah, you talk about going after a guy like this and the surprise of them going after like a guy like this. I think there would have been a little bit of risk not having like a true point guard. Now you could have combated it, I think, like the way they did 2 years ago, where their offense just became Marcus Damask in post ups and back downs, because they could have done that with Stoyakovich and Mirkovic too. But I don't know. I had people reaching out to me when I talked about this team, and they're like, gosh, I'd really like to get a guy that, I think someone said this, so pardon me if you're watching this. Man, I just would really like a guy that comes off the bench who can really guard and knock down threes. I'm like, those guys are going for $2 million in the open market. Like that, just those guys don't just come out of thin air. Those guys aren't depth pieces anymore. Those guys are there's a premium on those guys. So really like the addition. I really like, I think for Kylan, it looked like there was speculation and people outside, I think the Illinois circles being like, whoa, how much time do we have left in the portal? 9 hours to go. Is Kylan going to enter the portal? Kylan sounded like he was on board with this. And Kylan knows, again, just like I talked about with Petravic, Kylan knows who he is as well. And that like Drew Holiday type of role is perfect for a guy like that. So this helps him more than it hurts him for sure.
Yeah, and this is his team. I think it's his and Tommy's team. Like those are the captains of this team, without a doubt. Like you said, I think this only makes him better. Ben Humrichous officially back. We got that confirmed. How does his role change, Mike? And how does he help this team?
I think minutes will change a little bit. I don't think his responsibilities change as a player. I think we talked about that on the last pod, but I'm really happy to see him back, truthfully. I've said this before. I think what he went through this year, just in terms of the criticism, was about as unfair as I've seen it from this fan base. And I don't have any, doubt about that. Because again, I made the Cade Tyson comparison, a guy that was 2 points a game that shot 29% from three at North Carolina, who came from Belmont at 16 a game and 47% from three. That wasn't this. I mean, this is a guy that still made 60 plus threes last year for you. This is a guy that played almost 1,000 minutes and had 17 turnovers. Takes care of the ball. Just like Jake Davis, who came off the bench last year, where my whole thing was like, hey, he knows who he is, doesn't try to rock the boat. He doesn't turn it over. That's the same thing Ben is. And so I think he'll have an off the bench role this year, but I think he has value to this team. I think he got better as the season went on, defensively adjusting to this level. And I talked about adjusting to this level goes beyond the court. Yeah. I mean, this, Jeremy. I mean, there's a lot that you have to deal with outside of the court. And it looks like he's been about the right things. And you can't have enough guys like that in your locker room. So that's why I'm excited to see him come back. Because just like I saw someone talk about it the other day, they're like, "Oh, I don't know how I'd feel. Illinois has like a new roster again." No, they don't. They've filled in some pieces, but you got back, like I said, arguably two of your most consistent players at the end of the year, and you got back two double-digit scorers. Who, shout out Isaac Trotter, because he was the guy I confirmed this with. But you're one of 17 high major programs out of I think 68 that are returning double-digit scorers. Two of them. That's like not many teams can say that. On top of getting back Ty Rodgers, on top of getting back, all these other really important pieces like a Jake Davis, Ben Humrichous. There's a lot I think to be excited about, because retention is what I think gets me excited year after year in, year out, because I think it gives you a little bit more predictability and a foundation.
It's the mix of addition and the retention, right? And I've thrown the stat out there to our audience, so I apologize. But Mike, like, they have 44.2 6% minutes continuity coming back. That is almost identical to 23-24, the exact percentage. And that doesn't even include Ty Rodgers, who, if you add him and his minutes from the year prior, that's like 60% retention. That is significant in nowadays. And then you've added, and potentially, I mean, you got 2 one-and-done talents, but you potentially upgraded with the experience, obviously, that you've added the front court. And it's going to be really, really interesting. Ben Humrichous, can he play some of the 3, Mike? Because I think of, Mirković and the Ivisic boys and then Humrichous. That is a hell of a front court, especially offensively. But you can also go big, you can go small with Ty Rodgers in there. They got a lot of flexibility with all the pieces they have there.
Yeah, I think everybody talks about positionless basketball. This is kind of what that is. I mean, you have again, your table setters, you have Petravic, you have guys that you're going to run offense through. But some of these other guys, depending on the personnel, for sure. I mean, I could definitely see Ben playing the 3. And another key component of this too is I was in a conversation on X the other day with somebody about, hey, I don't think they addressed the shooting. And I'm like, well, shooting's hard to predict. Year in and year out, when guys come from a different place, there's guys that don't shoot it well, they can shoot it better. There's guys that shoot it really well that, won't shoot it as well. That stuff can fluctuate. But for me, what I'm more interested in seeing the carryover on is offensive rebounding. Because that, to me, if you aren't as good as of an offensive rebounding team, then the shooting really matters. If you're a great offensive rebounding team and a great shooting team, like those are the teams that go to Final Fours and beyond. If you're a not so good shooting team, but a good offensive rebounding team like we saw last year, you can get by for sure. And you can win games just based off of second chance opportunities and winning the margins. So how does this team fare in that category this year? That's my question. Because I see a leap from Stoyakovich on that side. I can definitely see it. I mean, I think he was at 0.9 offensive rebounds last year, which is similar, I think, to what Terrence was at. Terrence, I think, was 0.5 the year before he came to Illinois, and then he was 1.2. I mean, he almost doubled it. And I think Stoyakovich can be in that like 1.2, 1.5 area. I think Mirković is great using leverage. Both Ivisics, they'll be able to bat balls around just with their sheer size. And Ty.
He's Ty, an interesting guy on this team to me. He fills in a lot of gaps, doesn't he?
He does. And I think just like I talked about with Ben, getting another guy back that understands who he is, that is about the right things, that is a great culture guy. I mean, all that stuff goes a long way. It's why I think this Illinois team should be much easier to predict preseason than last year's team. Yeah. Not even close, in my opinion. So those are things I look at. The offensive rebounding and the rebounding in general, I think is I think Brad and that staff saw how important it is to cover up certain deficiencies, and you got to think they want to hammer that home again this year.
All right, everybody's got questions, obviously, Mike, about the defense with this group. Not a lot of, athleticism, quickness, though they've added a little bit of that. There's a lot of rim protection, right? There's certainly a lot of rebounding, defensive rebounding, and I would sit there and look at this from this perspective. Stoyakovich is an improvement defensively over Will Riley. No question, right? Kasper Siakashonis, Ty Rodgers is an upgrade there. How Petravic fits into here, but what would you say defensively, Mike? How big of an improvement can they make? Because I think they make an improvement, but how big?
I think they make an improvement. I think they ended up 40th last year in the country. I mean, I don't think this is going to be like a top 10 defense in the country, but if you can be in that 20 to 30 range, that's great. And I will say, I mean, I think some of these guys, especially the international guys, get somewhat of a bad rep, like, they can't move their feet or this and that. But those guys, and I've watched Mirković a lot now. Yes, long closeouts, not his strength. When you have to momentum going one way, bring momentum back another way, not his strength. But he is really good at just being able to diagnose defensively. He is really good at being able to understand, okay, I'm on the weak side. There's a ball screen on the other side. We're putting 2 on the ball. Guys roll into the basket. I got to go over and tag. And when I tag and my guy X's out on my guy in the corner, I got to go back out to the guy on the wing. Like, he understands all those things, even at 19, which, let's just be honest. I mean, we talked about all this. I think people think offensively when they think of international guys, like, oh, they're so well schooled and well drilled, and just the shooting, the ball handling, the playing off 2 feet, all that stuff. But defensively too is where I think they really make up for whatever you want to call these perceived limitations.
Mhm.
So that's why for Petravic, who was a little bit slight, he's still really good, I think, as a rover and being disruptive in gaps. Mirković, again, is good off the ball. Stoyakovich is good off the ball and can still move his feet, track. I talk about, being able to track with his eyes, blocking shots. Zvonimir was one of the best in the country, per 40 or whatever you want to say, per 100 possessions in terms of blocking shots. So how they move them around, where they put them, I think is important. But I'll go back to the ball screen defense, because that to me, I expect them to play a lot of drop again this year.
Right.
I would fully expect that, just because it takes you out of what I'm talking about, being in rotation, having Mirković like have to tag and run to another side. And, maybe there's certain lineups where you can be a little bit more aggressive and force turnovers. Cause I think this, again, this is probably a team that would like to do that. So you don't have to rely on being, A to A+ level efficient offensively. But I think it'll give you a little bit more leeway to play probably more conservative ball screen defense, because I think you'll take care of the ball better this year than you did last year. So all that's on the table for this team, and we'll see how they adjust. But I do know with Brad, that's how you grade out defensively, a lot of times can determine whether or not you're on the floor. So these guys will have more of a responsibility. And I think for Andres too, for Stoyakovich, I mean, he was really good not getting in foul trouble last year. Part of that is because of how important he was for Cal, but we'll see. I think there's another step that he can take on that end too, and I think Illinois can get it out of him.
Mike, I think you and I would both agree that this roster is likely complete. Just the money they've spent, we'll see. I mean, never know.
For your sake.
Do you think they had anything?
I don't think so. I think this is probably it. I think I don't want to go through the whole offseason without mentioning the 2 freshmen.
Yeah, Wagler and Lee. Yeah.
You never know. You truly never know. I mean, one of those guys could end up being a guy, like an impact guy in the rotation, and we could sit here and be like, man, we didn't mention him once. I know there was a number of schools. You said it's Wagler, right?
Yeah.
A number of schools that were talking to me about him before he had committed, because I think he was one of those guys that was a little bit more like under the radar.
Yeah.
Like there were some really really good Mountain West type schools that were like, we're trying to get this guy fly under the radar and get this guy. Yeah.
Minnesota wanted him to be their next Cam Christie. Like that's what he can be. And he's kind of more of a playmaking guard at 6'6". Like I love his ceiling at the college level. Brandon Lee's physically ready. And he's a bucket. So yeah, I wouldn't count out fringe minutes for either of those guys with a backcourt that doesn't have a ton of depth to it.
No. And I think, maybe that's part of it too. I mean, if you could have gotten Adam Miller as a 6 man, great. I mean, that's a really good spot. It's just seemed like that recruitment became a little bit untenable at some point. So I think they're done. And like I said, for your sake, going on a 8-day cruise, you would hope so.
So Mike, just what do you think of this team? What do you think of this roster that Brad Underwood threw together in 6 weeks? And I think Bart Torvik, if you include, some of the pieces they've added, has them a top 10 team, basically.
I really like it. And honestly, when I go through the list of reasons why I like it, the additions are probably a little bit further down the list than you would think. Because like we talked about in the beginning of the pod, retention is so key. I mean, I just looked around. I'm sitting there at the Elite 8 in Indy. I'm sitting there, at the Final Four, and you're just looking at all these teams. You're like, okay, multi-year guy. That's the recipe. So the excitement that I have comes from getting back not only just Boswell and Ivisic, but getting back Ty Rodgers. And that is like, those are pillars. Those are foundational guys. And even for Humrichous, that is a guy, like I said, is about the right things. And that no matter what position you put him in, He's not going to fret. He's not going to, oh my God, I'm not getting X amount of minutes. That's all so important when you're integrating some of these other really exciting additions like you have with Ivisic and Mirković and Petravic and Stoyakovich. It's just crazy to say all of them, but I'm excited because I do think this team. I'm curious preseason. I tweeted about this. I think last year that team probably should have been a top 25 team preseason, but there was like, how many people are watching Tommy and the Adriatic League? How many people are watching KJ? How many people are watching Will? And those were big parts of the team.
The Illinois staff had to like force CBS to put KJ in their top 100 players to watch this season, like, because they didn't know. I mean, these are guys that love college basketball, and they just didn't know.
I don't blame them. Yeah.
I
don't blame them. I mean, it's really easy to. I mean, I see a lot of the preseason rankings, the way too early ones. Right now, it's a lot of it is very much guys going through a checklist and saying who left, who's back, next team, who left, who's back, and for Illinois, there's going to be this. They lost 2 first-round picks. And yes, those are going to be 2 first-round picks, and 2 first-round picks that really helped you, mind you, throughout the year. I mean, KJ, I think, struggled a little bit towards the end of the season, but are you sweating on Selection Sunday if he doesn't rescue you the way he did in November and December?
That's what gets lost in the conversation about going with those freshmen. Everyone's like, it was a negative that they had 2 freshmen. If you didn't have those 2 on your team last year, do you make the tournament? No.
You're sweating.
I
think you're sweating.
I don't think they make it, Mike. But yes, you are at best, I think, sweating it out. That's what kind of gets lost is like, yeah, you dealt with the downside of it, but there's also, you added KJ, I think on May 28th.
Yeah.
Right. It's May 1st. Think of how different that is this year. You added Will Riley on June 12th, something like that. Like, to add those guys that late in the game, that was part of the thing. It's like, you didn't just choose to go freshman. It's just that talent that was available to you, you're going to take it, right? And now the difference is you have Tommy that's been here for 2 years. You have Kylan who's been here for 2 years. Of course, you've added more veterans around them, but if KJ or Will Riley were coming into this team, I'd feel a heck of a lot better about it.
Absolutely. And so, I had people talking to me and saying, well, that team last year, there was just a lack of toughness. I'm like, it was more inexperience than it was toughness. And that's what I think led to the real ebbs and flows, not only just from game to game, but within one game. I mean, that half to half, war to war with that team. So that's why I feel better about this team. I would probably right now, I would put them in that probably top 10 to 15 range. I think they're call it 12, 13, 14 with, the caveat of like, okay, how does Stoyakovich, how does some of these guys, really great pieces, how do they integrate? I think the foundational pieces are what pushes me to make them a no doubt top 25 team. But even if you look at the Big Ten right now, I think you have to give Purdue the nod for the preseason favorite in the league. I mean, you return 2 All-Americans.
Best point guard in the country. They have
it's
great post player. They have Matt Painter. Like, yes.
Jacobson will be back this year. The kid from Israel, good player. I'm interested. I think that's what they needed, honestly, is somebody to be a combo off ball with Braden that cannot, can lessen the load a little bit for him.
The big man transfer, right?
Oscar Clough, I'm hitting the pause button a little bit there on him. I think gaudy numbers at South Dakota State, but he was at Washington State 2 years ago and was whatever he was 8-4, which I think, maybe he's a double-digit guy this year. Maybe I don't really expect that given their front court rotation. So
it's not, not like dumb. You're saying?
No, God, no.
Can you imagine him at this level?
Oh God, imagine him just what he would have commanded in the portal as a 2,000 point scorer. But I think so. Purdue would be up there for me. It's interesting because Michigan State's flying under the radar a little bit. I think you look at Michigan State's fan base and they're all like, They missed out on Darius Adams, a really prized, high school recruit that's now going to Maryland. Maryland's interesting too because you get Pharrell Payne. I mean, it's their Miles Rice goes over to. I mean, it's just a really interesting team. I don't have them in like the top 5 for the Big Ten. Illinois, I do have. Michigan is like, well, I'll stick on Michigan State for a second because they still have fears. They still have those bigs that, again, understand who they are. And then you go get Glenn from FAU, who is just a freak, man. Like he's a freak and a gazelle and a really good rebounder. Trey Fort is a guy that can really shoot it. Well-traveled, but can really shoot it, has proven throughout his career. A lot of really good fits there for them that I think should make them preseason top 5 in the league. They may not be because I think teams are going to look and think they didn't do enough in the portal. But Michigan's the other really weird one for me because Cadeau is going to have more ball handling responsibilities than he's ever had. Playing next to the guys that he played next to it at UNC with RJ Davis and Seth Trimble. But the bigs that they have, I mean, obviously Merez, but you get Mara from UCLA, but they have the potential, Michigan, to, I think, have the biggest swing out of any team in terms of preseason projections because Yaxel Landeborg, if he comes to Michigan, I think he should be a first-round pick. If he comes to Michigan, I think that's a team that will probably be a top 10 team preseason. They'll probably be a top 2 team in the Big Ten. If he doesn't, and I know they got Namari Burnett back, Trey McKinney, I mean, that's a guy that really Illinois was in on for a little bit. Good player, Bulldog. They go from what I think is like top 2 to like top 7 or 8. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's a pretty big swing for them. So I'll be curious to see what happens there. Oregon is another one that, I know Biddle's testing the waters right now. Can they get him back? Because they got Shellstad back. They got, Evans back. They got, added a few other, I think, key additions from the portal. They're still in on some other guys that they could add. I think Sarr is one of them. So they stand to be right there in the mix. So I'd say Purdue, Illinois, Michigan State, and then Oregon / UCLA. UCLA I saw was like top 10 preseason and some, like I think CBS had him top 10. I don't see that. I mean, Dent's a good player. I'm not as excited about some of the other ads that they had, like Xavier Booker. But they did get Bilodeau back, Sky Clark, for whatever you want to think about Sky Clark. Good player. Eric Daly's back. I mean, they did return some key pieces. So I see them being like a back end top 25 team, but I don't see them being this top 10 team that people speak of.
USC.
I don't even know why. I think I just completely hijacked the podcast there, but
I don't mind it. I was enjoying it. I was like, yeah, they did add this. That's what I'm starting to think of again. So I'm glad you went down USC adding Rodney Rice and Chad Baker Mazzara. I don't know how many million between those two players, but that's a lot of money to spend. 6 or 7?
Yeah, 5.5, 6. Yeah. I mean, USC is an interesting one because they had, and then the kid's name's escaping me. When you looked at their backcourt, he just decommitted. Forget his name now. But he had just decommitted from USC and is now back on the open market. He would have been really good. I mean, Claude obviously would have been great around those guys too, but he's gone. Probably ends up at Florida. But yeah, I mean, again, I talked about Maryland with like Pharrell Payne and Miles Rice. They get the Watts kid from Texas A&M as well, or from maybe Texas Tech. It's an interesting influx of talent to the league. Again, I think it's going to be a really strong league this year.
I want to believe in the retention of Ohio State with Thornton, Royal, and Mobley all back. I didn't like that team last year. I thought it was really underachieving. I really think Bruce Thornton needs to get to an NCAA tournament, so I hope it for him.
I do too. And the Tilly kid from Santa Clara is a good ad. Just for them at that 5 spot. They didn't have a lot of dependability at that spot. I mean, Bradshaw going to Memphis is perfect. He's going to fit in well there with Doug McDaniel. But yeah, I mean, I think you look at the Knoll kid from Wright State. I've obviously watched him a few times. They had Gabe Cupps. I don't know if they did enough.
Yeah.
Because you're like, well, we retain guys. We're like, okay, you retain guys for what? From a team that obviously missed the tournament last year, that really fell apart at the end of the year too. I mean, I was there at the Big Ten tournament. Those guys did not want to be there. So we'll see what ends up happening. They need it. I think Jake Diebler needs it as well.
I agree. All right, last one for you, Mike. You kind of hit on this a little earlier, but just to expound on it. Now the staff, when they get these guys here, I don't know when every player will be here. That'll be one of the first things I ask Brad Underwood when we get the chance to ask him. But what does the Illini staff need to work through with this group once they get here? Because obviously that was a problem last year. They brought in KJ, who had played so much basketball, and gave him a break. But all of these guys were coming in different times due to visas, all that. Could that happen again this year with Petravic and Mirkovic? We'll see. But what do you think, like, they got to work through once they get here on campus?
I think it always starts defensively. What you want to do defensively, and seeing what you got defensively first. I mean, part of that's just going to be from situational drills and open gyms and open runs. But then when you shift over to the offense, I think this is the point in time of the year where, like I talked about, it's like you could do this guy and do this, put this guy here, but you have to experiment with that stuff throughout the summer and throughout the fall. And I think a hallmark of that 23-24 team, which is really interesting because Terrence Shannon was what should have been an All-American, first team All-American. They didn't run a whole lot for him.
No.
Right? He did so much in transition, obviously. And then they would, sometimes do like the rub screen, bring him up top, set a really high ball screen to get him going downhill. You did some off the ball, pin down, stagger away stuff. I think there's a lot that you can mirror with Shannon and Damask that you can do with, and Will Riley for that matter, that you can do with Stoyakovich. I mean, one of the things they did just from a matchup hunting standpoint a few years ago was what you call like 21 action, which is really just a reverse ball screen. Justin Harmon would do it a ton, where you have a guard in the corner with a favorable matchup for your wing, and you just come up from the corner and set a reverse ball screen for your guy, or pistol action where that guy's setting the reverse ball screen. And then you also have Tommy maybe setting it, or Mirkovic setting it on the other side. So when you think about this, I'm just envisioning, Stoyakovich brings it down the left side, and maybe Boswell runs up the court on the left side in the corner, and you have Boswell come set the reverse ball screen for Stoyakovich, so he can have the choice, right? He can come off the left and get that switch. And if he does get that switch and you're running pistol, now you got Mirkovic coming up top to set that next screen, and it's a flare for Boswell, or it's a flare for Petravic to be able to catch and rip with his right hand downhill. And then you can play in back downs there. You can roll Mirkovic to the rim out of it. There's just a lot that you can do. And that's like one little set action, one little continuity.
We're getting into the mind of a coach here with LaTulip, because it's like you're thinking of the possibilities of.
There's a lot of them. I mean, I talked about like put Tommy in the corner and put Mirkovic. You can run 21 action with Mirkovic, and even he can handle it. Maybe you get him in a switch, go to back downs, make a read out of it. And then if you need to just settle down and run basic, ball screen continuities, you can do it. But the way Cal used Stoyakovich last year, they had him come off of a lot of staggers, a lot of, because with his size, if you can get a guy trailing you, you get that curl cut. Now he's just on your back. You don't even need a ball screen. You just come off, get the catch, and be able to just play with pace, get downhill, get to the line, finish around the basket. And that's not even, I haven't even mentioned playing 5 out with Tommy up top and having guys cut off of it. I mean, there's just a lot that you can do with this offense. But that, again, that can be a great thing, and it can be a not so great thing, because if you go through the season not having an identity, then guys don't necessarily get comfortable. Why that team was so good in 23-24 was because running what they ran with Damask, Guerrier was always on, the weak side wing. And, Ty was always in the weak side, dunker spot or short corner. So he understands where to get his offensive rebounds. And Guerrier can slash. We saw him make those 45 cuts from the wing for dunks. And that's where he got his threes. He got his threes from the corner most times too. And then you shoot a higher percentage because you know where the shots are coming from.
Yep.
Last year, I just thought there wasn't as much predictability with that. And I thought it led to lesser percentages. So you still want to find, just because you can do 15 things offensively doesn't mean you want to do 15 things offensively. Maybe you find the 6 or 7 things that are like, this is what we're most efficient with, and this is what we're going to hammer home. So that's all the stuff that you figure out through the summer and the fall.
Through 4 off seasons now of this kind of era of basketball, we've learned that Brad Underwood can go get talent and reset a roster in the off season. And this one has more of a vibe of 23-24 because of the retention, plus you're old. So that's why I think it'll be interesting to see now, can you get the most out of this? How do they get the most out of this? That's the fun part, is they get in the lab and put all this stuff together, Mike.
And they have time to plan more than they have in the last few years, right? Because we talked about the roster potentially being set. Now your days in the office are spent, hey, this is how we're going to really try to set the table for ourselves the second these guys get on campus. What do we want to do? You didn't have that last year. You didn't have that the previous year because both Terrence and Coleman decided on what, May 25th?
Yeah.
So that changes drastically what your needs are, what you need to go get. You don't have to be steady recruiting like you have been the past few years. I mean, what was it, 4 years? Was it 4 years ago when Kofi went into the portal?
Yep.
Right? Like, we're going to get him back. What's going to happen?
Matthew Meyer was late May.
He was late May. The early guys last year were Kylan. It was Trey.
Tommy was May 12th or something like that.
Tommy was early May as well, early to mid-May. So again, from a preparation standpoint, this is really crucial for them that they have the pieces in place, and then that you can start communicating these things not only to the guys that are on campus and you get them into individual workouts. You can start doing it like, hey, Ty, this is probably what we're going to see here. This is what you're going to do. Kylan, same thing. And then if you have, you're in constant communication with Petrovic and Mirkovic, and maybe there's stuff that you're sharing with them, continuities you're sharing with them. I mean, there's all sorts of possibilities, but it's a luxury to have this done this early because there's a lot of teams that aren't done right now. There's a lot of teams that are still scrambling around to try to find guys, pay guys, and then have to deal with guys that are in the NBA deadline and the early entry for the draft, because we saw that list come through. Stoyakovich not even testing the waters is massive.
Yep. Because
you don't have to worry about that. Mm-hmm. The same can't be said for some other teams. So I think Illinois is in a good position on that front.
Unlike a couple of years ago, you're not waiting on anybody in the NBA draft because I think those guys are all right. Like those guys, we know what those decisions are likely going to be. So, Mike LaTulip, you are the goods, man. Appreciate you joining us so quickly after your vacation. We'll catch up a little bit later, man, as we look forward to what this roster will start to look like once they get here on campus, man.
Hey, good luck on your vacation.
Okay.
Give me one title. Give me one book title.
Okay, so I got so many suggestions from people, and I wrote a bunch of them down. So I really appreciate that. But I finally got around to reading The Devil in the White City by Eric Larson, which is so dang good. So I went with 3 of his books. People kept talking about him. So I got Dead Wake. That's about the sinking of the Lusitania before World War I. In the Garden of the Beasts, which is about the Nazis, Americans living in Nazi Germany, and The Splendid and the Vile, which is about Churchill. I just love the way he's a storyteller. He's such a good storyteller, and how it's nonfiction, but it almost reads like fiction because that's how he kind of writes as a storyteller. So I'm looking forward to those. I hope to knock out at least 2 of them. Maybe I can get to 3. You
should pull a Rosillo, have him on the pod. have like a little section of the pod where you just talk about the book.
Illini Inquirer book club. We're going to start.
I think people there would be a few people that would be interested for sure.
By the way, a book. Have you ever read the book about the 1984 NBA draft?
No, I haven't.
It's phenomenal. I bought it for Piper for a Christmas present one year just because it's like I think oh man, let me look that up while I'm at it. But it's so good to go back through that draft because you get the whole story of Hakeem, which I want to read the biography about him, which came out. I think
is it Tip Off?
Yeah,
is that what it's called?
Yeah,
okay.
Really good, really good. Easy read too. You could read it pretty quickly. So if you want to go back,
Philippe Bondi, is that the
yeah. So it's got Hakeem, Sambui, why that pick was made, obviously Jordan, Barkley. I think Sam Perkins is in there and John Stockton. Those are the main ones they talk about. It's really good.
I may or may not have just added it to my cart.
There you go. There you go.
I know what I'm reading in May.
There you go. All right, Mike LaTulip. Thank you, buddy.
All right, dude. Safe travels.